In the darkness of Japanese legends, there is a terrifying ghost that people still whisper about its appearance. Jikininki, the corpse-eating spirit. This is not a normal spirit, but a cursed being, taking the form of a living person but acting like a monster. Jikininki devours the bodies of the dead, those whose remains are left unattended, and it relentlessly haunts anyone brave enough to listen to its story. This ghost is terrifying not only because of its cannibalistic acts, but also because of its immortality and insatiable hunger. Jikininki appears on dark, moonless nights, wandering through deep forests or around desolate villages where the dead are not properly buried. When Jikininki arrives, it doesn't just feast on the bodies, but awakens deep fears within the living. So would you dare face Jikininki, or will you let that fear haunt you forever? On a dark night, when thick clouds covered the sky, a small village in Japan sank into darkness. The cold wind swept across the barren fields, carrying the damp scent of earth and fallen leaves. The village, usually quiet, held a mystery that the villagers dared not speak of. It was the story of a cursed spirit, a soul unable to find peace, Jikininki. This tale was told by a man named Taro, who had grown up in this village but could never forget the terrifying memories from his childhood. As a child, Taro often heard rumors about Jikininki from the older people in the village. They would say that on stormy, rainy nights, when darkness enveloped the land and everyone in the village locked their doors, Jikininki would wander around the village searching for unburied corpses. Jikininki was not a normal ghost. It did not seek peace or the afterlife. Instead, it was bound to live by the instinct of eating the dead. Those who died without anyone to care for their burial, those who were left unburied, became prey for Jikininki. It would quietly approach, devouring the corpses in the darkness, then continue wandering through the black night. People said that when Jikininki fed, it not only satisfied its hunger, but also awakened deep fears in the hearts of the living. The most terrifying part was that if someone saw Jikininki witness the spirit in action, they would be cursed. These people would not only face the horror of witnessing a ghost devouring a corpse, but they would also become its next victim. Death would come to them, but not a normal death. They would become part of this endless cycle, dragged into Jikininki's life, trapped in a never-ending spiral of horror. Taro recounted that every time night fell and the wind blew through the empty fields, he couldn't help but hear strange sounds. Soft laughter, light footsteps as though someone was walking around the village. Taro felt a deep fear within, for he knew that in that darkness there was something unseen, something that was watching, searching. One day, Taro decided to return to his old village, the place where he had grown up and heard many terrifying stories from his childhood. The village had changed a lot, and as Taro stepped in, a strange feeling enveloped him. The old houses stood silently, covered in moss, as though time had forgotten this place. The streets were deserted with no one in sight. The air in the village felt heavy, as if something mysterious was lurking in the darkness. Taro couldn't deny the unease in his heart. He had heard the stories that the villagers used to tell, but now, standing amid the ruined houses, those tales seemed too real. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for an opportunity to emerge from the shadows. Determined to uncover the truth behind the legends, Taro decided to visit an old temple in the village, where the villagers said an elderly monk had once witnessed Jikininki, the corpse-eating spirit, and knew its secret. The temple was old, dilapidated, and deserted. The wind chimes rang each time the wind blew, creating mysterious and haunting sounds. Taro entered, his heart full of anxiety. The elderly monk, the only one still living in the temple, greeted Taro with a deep, knowing gaze. When Taro asked about Jikininki, the monk only shook his head, sighed, and began to recount a story that had been forgotten for many years. Jikininki, the monk began, is not a normal ghost. It is the spirit of those who died in hatred and were not properly buried. When they were alive, they committed terrible crimes, sins that cannot be forgiven. So when they died, instead of finding peace, they were cursed to eat the bodies of the unburied dead. Taro stood still as though a cold wind had passed through his heart. So, does that mean they cannot find peace? Taro asked, his voice choked. The monk continued, yes. These souls cannot escape the curse. They will continue to consume the dead until they achieve release. But it is not just because of this that they are trapped in this endless cycle. They must confront the sins they committed when they were alive in order to break free. Fear began to rise within Taro. He started to realize that in order to stop this nightmare for these souls to find peace, they must face the crimes they committed in life. So how can they be freed? Taro asked, his eyes filled with anxiety. The monk looked at Taro, his gaze full of understanding. There is only one way to banish them. You must uncover the cause of their death and help them be properly buried so they are no longer haunted by hatred. But if we do nothing, they will continue to wander, consuming the dead and seeking revenge. The monk's story sent a chill down Taro's spine. He realized that Jikininki was not just a ghost that devoured the dead, but a symbol of eternal punishment, never ending, for sins that the living could never cleanse. In the dark of the deserted village, as the wind blew through the branches, Taro promised himself that he would find a way to help these cursed souls find peace. But would he succeed? Or would he be drawn into Jikininki's curse, becoming a part of this endless haunting? That night, as darkness enveloped the village, Taro couldn't sleep. The fear of Jikininki, the cursed spirit, had haunted him for days. He knew that if he didn't confront this spirit, the village would remain trapped in darkness and never-ending fear. Though terrified, Taro made the decision that tonight he would go out, face this haunting, and find a way to free the vengeful soul. He carried with him a dim oil lamp, its weak light illuminating only a small patch of the surrounding blackness. A chill crept into every step he took as he made his way into the abandoned cemetery, the place where villagers said one could encounter Jikininki. The air grew strangely silent, with only the sound of the wind rustling through dry trees and the soft footsteps of Taro. But the deeper he walked into the cemetery, the greater his sense of unease became. Suddenly, a sound of footsteps echoed behind him, making Taro spin around. But no one was there. He gasped, trying to calm himself, convincing himself that it was just the wind. Yet the strange noises continued to haunt him. The cold breath, as though someone was standing right next to him, made Taro feel suffocated. Then, with a sudden crash from ahead, something seemed to break. A strange figure emerged in front of Taro. It was Jikininki. But it wasn't the shape of a regular man or woman. Jikininki was distorted, its face no longer human but filled with hatred, bearing horrific wounds as though it had been clawed apart. Its eyes were hollow, lifeless, staring coldly at Taro with an emotionless gaze. A wave of terror flooded Taro's heart, but he couldn't back down. Despite the evident danger, Taro bravely stood his ground and faced the spirit. He stood firm, locking eyes with Jikininki, and pleaded, "Let me help you find peace. You don't have to continue living in this hatred. I will help you rest." Jikininki didn't respond, but its hateful stare pierced Taro like a sharp blade. Taro wasn't sure if his plea could change anything, but he knew that only by facing this spirit and uncovering the cause of its death could he save the village from its endless torment. Jikininki stood there motionless, as if contemplating Taro's plea. There was no movement, no sound, except for the cold wind rustling through the old graves. The strange scene made Taro feel as though time had come to a halt, and the fear in his heart grew ever stronger. But when the spirit's eyes locked onto him, Taro did not step back. He persisted, pleading once more, "Let me help you. Don't continue living in this darkness. I will help you find peace." After a long pause, as though the spirit had heard Taro's plea, Jikininki's form began to change. The wounds on its distorted face seemed to dissolve, the marks of hatred and pain slowly fading away. The light from Taro's oil lamp suddenly grew stronger, shining on Jikininki's face, as if it were bathed in a magical glow. The deep scratches, the horrific wounds on its face slowly vanished, leaving behind a peaceful, calm expression free from hatred. Taro felt a gentle breeze, as though Jikininki's spirit had truly been freed. A sense of tranquility washed over him, as if the haunting had finally come to an end. He watched the spirit gradually fade and disappear into the darkness, leaving only a faint, lingering light in the quiet space. Though Jikininki's spirit had been set free, Taro knew that the story would never leave him. The spirit's eyes, the anger within them, and the warnings it had left behind would forever haunt him. Taro understood that the vengeance of abandoned souls was not an end, but a reminder that crimes are never forgotten. Even if the spirit found peace, the consequences of its actions would always linger, unerasable. Since that night, the village returned to its peaceful state, free from the ghostly figures and eerie footsteps in the dark. But Taro, though he had freed Jikininki, could never forget the strange confrontation. The warning from the corpse-eating spirit still echoed in his heart, an obsession he could never escape. And every night, as darkness once again enveloped the land, he couldn't help but remember that there are sins that no one can run from, no matter how much time passes. Thus, the story of Jikininki ends here, but one question remains. Can all cursed souls be redeemed, or will they forever wander in the darkness, devouring the dead to seek revenge? And would you dare face the abandoned spirits, or will you live in fear forever?